Hi, I'm Anas, and I'm creating an idle Moba Manager game. So before we get into actually changing how we do the battle system, I want to show you how we used to do it. Here we have the minions, Buddy and Bully, and as you can see, they are two separate trees, and yep, two different scripts. So every time I want to change anything for the minions, I have to do it both here and in here, which is not very good. When I had to add the hit flash, I had to add it as a player here and as a player here, and I had to target the sprite, I had to target the sprite in here, and it was a mess. Also, the minions is currently path follow, so how they work is in the map. We have paths, as you can see here. These lines, they come in from, we have a separate thing called here lanes. So we have top lane. Let me stretch this out. For the bullies, which they will follow, they'll spawn here and they'll just follow along the line until they come to the nexus. And then every time anything gets in close range with them, they will attack it. That's it. They have two states. They have the walk state, which is what they'll do all the time until they see someone that get in range. Then we'll change to attack and then back to walking if there's no one close. And that's basically how they work. They just get spawned in on these and they follow them, and that's how minion is doing. So there's not really any wiggle room. they just do that. That's it. That's all they can do. And I don't think that's good for the longevity of the game. Now for the structures, this is how we did it. I actually again used character body 2D, which I'm not entirely sure I'll do in the future. I'll have to research that. But again, we have the basic for both the tower and the nexus, and out from that, I inherited with the bully tower and the buddy tower, where they have the sprite and the hit flash, and in here we can choose what team they are. This is the buddy, and if you choose this one, it is the bully. Now it's the bully. Maybe that doesn't make a difference. Honestly, I'm not sure how I set this up. It's been a while. I assure you it works, I think. And it's the same for the nexus. So we have the basic, and then we have the inherited nodes here. Again, I'm gonna go away from inheritance if I can. Now moving on to the heroes. Here they're actually correctly a character body 2D, and they have a navigation agent, which they use the navigation map to look around or walk around. I think we can find it if we mark this on, this off. This is basically where they can walk, and they just get a target based on their script. So we have a main node here, and then from that, each separate enemy currently inherits from that and is again individually set up. So that means if we would have to add more enemies in the future, we would have to inherit from this script, and then we would have to set up the settings here. When you click on them, you would have to include a new sprite, set the sprite, and add this hit flash animation again from scratch with the key tracking and everything would have to be from scratch. Now for the friendly heroes, they all come from this scene. It's called basic. Again, they have all the nodes here. It's pretty much the same as for the bully. And then from that, we have two nodes inheriting it. We have the bot lane and the top lane. The reason this was done is because I was not sure how to code it, but it made it so that I could choose the initial lane inside of these nodes. So you could say this one is in bot lane and the top one is in top lane. And I think that was the main reason why I did it like that. Again, that's not how I want to do it in the future, because it's just not good. How are these nodes built up? Currently we have the health bar, which is actually the whole of the health. So every time the hero takes damage, it actually reduces the progress in the health bar. And then once the progress bar reaches 0, that's when the hero dies. I'm not entirely sure that's how I'm going to do it in the future. I think I'd rather have the health bar linked to the health and not the health linked to the health bar. My main biggest concern right now is with the state machine, which as a new programmer makes sense that I found that very hard. Currently only the defensive is set up, so this is all the logic for the heroes, and the way it's set up is again not very good. In here, actually within the state itself is where I'm doing the movement logic. It's not separate, so every time I would do a new state, so let's say instead of playing defensive, I want the hero to go aggressive. Once again, I would have to do the whole navigation and movement inside of the script. So there's a lot of double coding, which is in the end very bad practice. I know that. In the beginning, when I started this project, my goal was just to put something out, get like a prototype out and working, and then later when I started to get better at programming, then I would go back and change it, or maybe someone would be on the project with me in the open source code. Right now it's still just me, but I found the system that I want to go to, and I'll show you that next. Here we are, a little while later, and the system I'm going to be introducing is the component system. A lot of you probably heard of it, but if you haven't, it's basically just a lot of components that does very separate things. So the move component will just control movement. Navigation will only do the navigation for the unit you put it on. And yeah, we'll have different states as components. And then we just add the components to whatever needs it. So for example, the tower will not need the move component or the navigation component or the pushing state. And I will just be making a lot of components and then adding them on as we need them. And they are all intertwined by having exports, and then you can click on them and then you have to assign them. So the actor is basically the minion or the main node, and that is what we will be doing. And as I'm coding it, I will take you along. The next one I'm probably going to be working on is the navigation one. So, working with the navigation system is odd. I have not changed too many things around. Maybe I'll go back to my old files and see what I've changed, but I started getting an error with how I'm doing navigation mesh, and the cell size is 1 while assigned to a cell size of 16. I tried to fix it with the project settings and the cell size in here, setting it to 16, but it's always been on 1, and this has never been an issue before. So that's what we are working on right now. So I looked back at the old game before I started doing changes, and while I was making changes now, I noticed that the navigation map was at 2 and -4. So I had changed it back to 0, and apparently that's what broke it. It needs to be at position 2 -4. In order for, I guess, the mesh and the navigation map to line up. So yeah, in case you run into the same issue, I guess the grid here does not line up with 0, and it needs to be in the corner, and that gives you an error. I think I defeated the navigation issues I was having. So what I wanted to do was to have every single one of these colors be on navigation layer 0, and then have the champions navigate on that layer. And then green would also be navigation layer 1, and then purple would be also navigation layer 2. And that way I could say minions can only move on layer 2 or 1, and heroes on 0, and that could be the whole map. The issue is, if one of these is also 0, then connecting these two gives an error with the navigation map. And I'm not sure how to fix that, so I made a workaround. Basically, it's just going to be that the heroes can walk on all 3 layers. So they can navigate on layer 0, 1, and 2. And then the minions will still just be set to the navigation layer they can walk on, either 1 or 2. And it's just going to happen in here. Once they get spawned, it's going to go into the minion, it's going to set a function, the setup function. Here will take if it's the top lane or not. And then it will go into the next function in the navigation component. Here we'll take if it is top, and if it is, then we will set the navigation layer to the top layer, and if it's not, we'll set it to the bot lane. And that's basically it. That should work for navigation for the minions and being on the right layer. We finally have some progress. The monsters actually move. So far only this tower has team targeted, so you can see this minion is targeting the closest target, which is the tower right now. And now that the minion is in front of the target or the tower, the enemy will now focus that. There's currently no combat, but the navigation actually works for the minions. It seems I will have to move the tower back or figure out why these monsters are so fast coming down this way. But it's something. It's finally starting to look like something. The minions run out and they meet in the middle. They start battling, and when they die or reach 0 HP, they die. So, yeah, pretty cool. The minions have now been set up using solely the component system, no inheritance at all. And if we launch the game, it should pretty much work. None of the other things in the game has currently been set up correctly, so the minions can't really target the towers or anything like that. I think the only one who's targetable is the top tower. And next we're gonna be working on the towers and the nexus, including this new system we made. At the end of this video, I'll go through how I set up the component system. If you're interested, you can kind of see how it's built up and maybe use it for your own project. Also, you can check out the GitHub page. Again, all the code is there out publicly, so if you're creating a game like this, or you're just interested in seeing how you can use a component system, you can check it out. Again, I'm a little bit of a new programmer, so it might not be usable, but maybe you can get some ideas. I just set up the tower and it pretty much works, so now I'll do the same for the Nexus, and I thought maybe it could be fun to do it as a time lapse. So let's go ahead and do that. And that's pretty much it. I will need to add the script within the Nexus, which is a little bit different than the tower one, but I can almost copy the code from here and into there. Every single entity, like the tower and the Nexus, is gonna have their own specific script, because there is gonna be a little bit of variation between them. For example, the class name, of course, is gonna be the Nexus, but yeah, that's how easy it is with the component system. You just add everything. You go through them, see if there's anything you need to change. The export variables, mostly it is just done already, so yeah. And I already had made the state for structures, so it's gonna use the same state as the tower, as it's basically just gonna target anything that's in its range. Now I'm gonna make sure that the new Nexus is actually gonna get spawned in instead of the old one, and just gonna set up this script real quick. Changing the script basically took 1 minute. All I had to do was change the sprites. I had to remove some scaling in here, and then I also remembered that within these hurtbox and hitbox components, I needed to remove the collision, as it's actually getting assigned here depending if it's enemy team or friendly team, so if it's a friendly nexus or enemy nexus. And there we have it. The component system has now been implemented. Other than the heroes, I don't know what the heroes are doing. They have not been changed, so they're a little bit wonky right now. But basically the minions, the towers, and the nexus has been set up, which is super exciting. I can't wait to start working on the heroes, but I'll do that in the next video. I thought it would be a good idea to end the video off with going through the different components I made and just seeing how they work. So first off, we have the top node, the parent node, with the minion. It does need a little bit of functionality, but it's pretty easy. Here I just implement the different things I need to change, the different components, and then I set a variable specifically for the minion, because the sprites are not exactly the same size, so the friendly minions actually have to be scaled down a little bit. And then it just has a function called setup, which is called every time the wave manager spawns in the minion, and it checks first if it's an enemy minion, which is set within the enemy wave spawner. If it is, then we go into the stats component. We set the enemy to be an enemy, because other components relies on this. Then we set the sprite, and we set its collision layer. And we do the exact same thing for the friendly minions, just basically opposite. Then for enemy minions, we apply the match modifier, which is adjusted every single game. And then we have the get hurt box, because some of the scripts, mostly the different states, require this in order to set who they need to attack. Then we of course have the sprite, which is just normal Godot node, and the navigation agent, again normal. Don't think I made any changes in here. We have the debug on, you can take that off, else it's pretty standard. I think I removed the navigation layers as it'll be set in the navigation component. Collision shape, just small collision shape, so the minion has a hitbox. And then we have the flash component, which is just every time it takes a hit, it will flash basically, and it creates a timer. And then you have in here, you see when you click on it, you have to first choose the stats component. This is used to tell it every time its health gets changed. And when it does, it plays this animation. This is the flash. And it takes the sprite's material and applies the flash material, which basically just makes it white. And then once the timer times out, then we make it back to what it originally was. And that's all the flash component does. The stats component in here, basically when you click it, you have to put the stats for the minion and the tower. I do this manually. When you come to heroes, it's gonna be a little bit different. It's gonna be set up basically in the script. But for the minions and towers and nexuses, I just did it on the side here. Then we need to choose the actor, which is basically just the parent node, which in this case is the minion. If it's the tower, then you just choose the tower. Pretty easy. And that's all you have to do with this. It's already set up. Basically here you just have the damage, the movement speed, attack speed. It will later include also ability power and such, depending, because we will need that for the heroes, but right now I haven't needed it, so just set it up for the minions and towers for now. Then we have the hurt box component, which is basically the minions, hitbox, or what will be attacked from the enemy. So when the tower needs to target the minions, it will target the hurt box. It will take damage, and it will emit that signal, which I believe... Okay, just saw we had a little bit of double coding here, so I adjusted it. Now the hurt component has the stats component as an export variable, and now it just calls directly into the health node that it needs to take damage. Before it was going through another component called hurt component, but it basically just took this signal and put it into the stats component. I'm not sure why I would need that extra step there, so I just removed it. If there would be a reason for that, please let me know, but it seemed unnecessary. And the hitbox component is basically it's the unit's range of things it can attack. When anything enters its range, it will append or add that unit to an array, and once it leaves, it will remove it. And again, these signals are actually not needed because I ended up doing our attack component a bit differently. Before, I used these signals in order to call a function, but the issue was it would only get updated when something happened in here, and it wasn't the best. So now it should be set up. Cleaning up as we go. Now we have the move component, which all it does is it basically goes in, it takes the navigation agent, that's again, you can assign over here. It finds out what its destination is, and then it just walks towards it. And it uses the movement speed, and we times it by delta to make sure that it is stable depending on your, or independent of your FPS. It's always the same. It also uses the stats component to get the movement speed, and of course the actor, which in this case is the minion, because we need to know what we are moving along, which velocity we are changing. For the navigation component, all this does, I think we did it inside of the main script, is we basically just set which navigation layer the unit can use. So if it's top lane, it can use the top lane navigation layer, and if it's bot lane, it can only use the bot lane. I can show you real quick. It looks like this. So this is the bot lane navigation layer, and this is the top lane navigation layer, and that's all that does. For the damage numbers, again we take the minion and we take the hurt box, because we need to know whenever we are taking damage, and when we do take damage we will display the damage number, and this will depend on what kind of damage we take. And then it's basically gonna do what we did before. It's gonna create a new label, and it's gonna set some settings for it and add as a child, and then it will do a tween, make it look fancy, real nice, And that's basically all this does. Now we have the attack component. I'm not entirely sold that this is the proper way to do it, but here we have it. It just needs the hitbox component and the stats component. It just creates a timer within itself, because we need that. This is going to be the attack timer, so the time in between attacks, which we will set the attack speed, get the attack speed from the stats component. And every time it times out, we will deal damage. So it will, in its process, it doesn't need delta here, check if there is a current target hurt box, so if we have a target, and then it's also checking if the attack timer is stopped. This is just to make sure that it doesn't continuously run as long as the timer is called, because once the timer is called, it's going to continue to attack its current target. And then it's going to check its current target is already in range, because we don't want it to start attacking things that's outside of its range, because for example the minions is going to set a target and then walk towards it. But that means it already has a target, but we also want to make sure that that target's in range before we start the attack timer. And then, yeah, every time it times out, it will deal damage. First, it checks if the enemy it's attacking is valid. I'm doing this because sometimes something else will kill it, and that will make it a null value. And here we just check if it is valid, and then we continue. And then we check if specifically the hurt box has the method called take damage, which we know it does, but it's basically just this function. And if it does, then, and it's still within the targets in range, then we will call that method and deal the damage that stats component damage, like the damage we do in the stats component. And then once the enemy is no longer there, we stop the timer. And if the instant is also not valid, we also stop the timer. And then it goes basically back to this and then checks if there's a new enemy it can attack. The def component, just in here we set the minion as the actor, or yeah, the top node, and the stats component. And what it basically does is it listens for a signal from the stats component that there is no longer any health left on the entity, and then it just queues free. In here is where we're gonna do all the logic for if you want it to explode, gonna bleed, or whatever is gonna happen when something dies. Right now it just queues free because it's the simplest. Then we have the health bar. I wanted again to make sure I contained everything within the node, so you can just add this, and then all you need to do in order to set it up is basically just add the stats component, because it needs the amount of health needed. And in here, when it's ready, it connects to the signal that every time basically the health changes inside of the stats component, we will run update health bar, which is down here, which is just going to change the value. So let's say it get healed, then we want to make sure that the value goes up, and if it gets damaged, we want to make sure that the health bar basically shows it's taking damage. We also added update max health. Currently this is mostly for the fact that we have the difficulty modifiers. So this is just to make sure if when the minions or enemies gets a buff from the modifier or reduction of health, that it updates the max value of the health bar and also its value. And that's all there is to this basically. The setup settings we run in the beginning, and that's just to make sure that the the component actually looks proper, because else it's just gonna, I think we have it in here, it looks like this. So it just updates it so it looks nice, and I wanted to do it inside of settings, because otherwise you would have to set it up every time you added the node or the component. When you have the state machine, I actually did this bit back. I just reused a lot of the code. First of all, we have the state that all of the different states extends from. So class name state. And here it's just very simple. We have the different function. Enter is basically underscore ready. And exit is every time you leave the state, if any functionality is needed to be added, it can be added here. The update is just the process, and physic update is just the physic process. We have the state machine, which is just gonna be in charge of basically setting the states. Which if you open up here, you can see we set the minion as the actor, and we set the initial state, which in this case is pushing state. There's not any more states on the minion because it basically just needs to push. There's not any logic there. It'll need to be different for the heroes. For the towers, they just have a state called structure state, which is basically just attack anything within range. But yeah, that's basically all this does, is just switch states and set the state. So it just set the initial state, and the actor. Navigation agent I'm gonna remove, but currently the old heroes that's still spawning in the game rely on this, so it's gonna take a little while to get that out. Now for the pushing state, it's a little bit like the defensive, but it's gonna check where's the nearest distance and the closest target, which is basically just its target. And then in the update function, which is just the process function, we all the time ask to set a new destination. We don't use the physics update, but it is required to have it in here, otherwise it doesn't understand. I'm not sure why we need it, but it needs to be in there, otherwise the thing breaks. Now every time we run this, we're basically gonna make an empty array of possible targets. We're gonna set the nearest distance to infinite, which means whenever we get a target, it's gonna be the closest. And then we check if the minion or tower or whatever, the actor, is an enemy. If it is an enemy, then we wanna add all of the nodes that is in the group of team. And if it's not an enemy, we wanna add enemies into the possible enemy targets. And then we just run through this array of targets. We check the distance to these targets, and if the distance is shorter than the nearest distance, which in the first case is always going to be because it's infinite, then we are going to set them as the nearest target. I'm getting tired here. And then we are going to set the destination for the closest target, and then we're going to take our navigation agent and set that as our new target position, which is what we need in the movement component, move component. And then lastly, we just set that target as our new target in attack, so that's the target we want to attack. And that's all this state does. And for the structure state, it's very simple. We want to check if we have anyone in range. If we do, we just want to start attacking them. That's all there is to the structure state. That's gonna do it for this video. I'm pretty new to explaining what I'm doing, and I'm also pretty new to doing what I'm doing. So hope you can follow along. Otherwise, again, check out the GitHub page. It's all there. And if you want to contribute to the project, please do. If you have any thoughts or notes, let me know in the comments. And have a very good Christmas. Hi, I'm Anas, and this is my video. Hi, I'm Anna. Wait. Hi, I'm Anas, and I'm creating an idle Moba. Hi, I'm Anas, and I'm creating an idle Moba Manager. Oh god. Hi, I'm Anas, and I'm creating an idle Fuck. Hi, I'm Anas. Wait.